Hello and welcome to another episode of PsyWicV. My name is Huy, and in this episode, we're going to talk about 7 things that we learned from traditional parenting.
All right, so I'm really glad that today we have this opportunity to really talk about and embrace what I'm calling traditional parenting style. Although, you and I both know that there is no such there's not such a thing, right? But I think that as people who grow up in the Vietnamese culture and embracing that culture, and also in cross reference to the American culture, I think that I identify traditional parenting style as being parented by a parent who is a first generation American. And there are many people who probably could relate to the story that I'm going to tell about my own life and how that affects me and what I appreciated most and what I've learned as a parent myself from the styles that I got or received from my parents. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about some of these experiences. And you know that as therapists or counselors, we don't always have the opportunity to talk about ourselves in settings where it's not appropriate. But I think that in this setting, because it is a personal experience, I just want to say these things with the sentiment that I am embracing the humble beginnings that I've had, and also expressing gratitude to all of the people who've contributed to who've contributed to my development. Exactly. So in Vietnamese, people say, ăn trái nhớ kẻ trồng cây, right? And so basically translating, you be grateful for the people who labored for your fruits or for your yield. And this is just a way of my expression towards that. But I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this and to be able to share. And I'm sure that lots of people will have the same sentiment.
I really like your idea of talking about traditional parenting because it can get a bad rap from time to time. Like, oh, traditional parenting will, I've heard, traumatize your kids or all of that. But I do believe that we can find the good and the bad in every culture. And we have psychology as a science. It helps us to understand more about the human psyche from youth to adults, and it helps inform traditional parenting. I don't think that it should break down traditional parenting. This is something very unique for us as Vietnamese, and we should celebrate that.
And for me, it's always been starting with the attitude or the spirit of gratitude. And for me, gratitude is one of those things that, those gifts that you have naturally and that you can develop, and very few people can take it away from you or break that down for you. But it is something that helps your children really revise or change their negative beliefs or negative assumptions about themselves and about the world. And so think about it in a way of this helping them to develop a skill that is going to help them get through life in a much more positive way. Right? So
how did your parents teach you gratitude?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that my parents had always done that was really helpful to me is always making sure that I recognize the good and the bad in things, right? That yes, we may have a little, but there are people who have worse, right? And growing up in Vietnam also, it makes it hard for you to forget that. Right. And so I always remember whenever I drive on the roads in Texas, I always think about how vast and how big and how great and how settled everything is, and how firm the foundation is in the bridges I drive over, right? And that I don't have to even worry about it breaking down or worry about things that happen to the foundation that is laid. And I think about that because then I also think about what it was like to grow up in sort of a village where there are dirt roads and you're having to kind of walk everywhere, or there are biking, people bike everywhere, and the appreciation for the fact that, that drastic change. Right. And sometimes the reminder from my parents of, look, this is where we were and this is where we are. And through whatever if you don't believe in God, whatever cosmic force there is that has gotten you from here to here is not just by our doing, but by fate, by destination, by God, by blessing, by gift, right? And that all of those things we can labor for, but our labor may or may not yield in that way. And we have to appreciate the fact that we have what we have, and there are lots of people who don't have those things. And I think growing up poor makes you much more appreciative of those things. And so it doesn't have to be, that if you grew up poor, that it's a traumatizing experience.
Not necessarily so.
Right. That the attitude and the gratitude that you have can change your perspective of how you receive your experiences and how you interpret them. And that's what you can help your children do, is guide them through that interpretation process so that they see it as the change, bad or good, as a venue for getting better.
And I agree. My parents usually, like growing up, usually remind me of just there are people who are worse off than you, and how lucky I am. I think parents should also be careful, because sometimes it can send a message of guilt and not of gratitude. And I can attest to that, and some people could attest to that too. But I think the underlying message is gratitude, and I think it's helpful for parents to clarify that to their children, because I think it's such a good attitude to have, gratitude, knowing that how I got, I didn't get here by myself. I received things that I didn't work for. And there are people who are worse off than me, and how I can use my privilege, however little that is, to my advantage and to help other people around me.
And I think that, as a child, my parents always, I can attest to this, that my parents always believed in me more so than I ever believed in myself. They say things to me about what I can do that is beyond my imagination, right? I'm going, well, wait a second, I can't do that. And they've already believed that I've done it. And I think that that's such a powerful thing for parents to have, is if you can see ahead of your children and you can see their potential, and I believe parents have that ability to see potential in their children, then convey that belief, convey that strength that you see in them that they don't already see in themselves. And for people who have adolescent children, this is such a crucial piece of development for them, that, at that age, when they're trying to find their identity and they're influenced by a lot of things in the world, if you can communicate to them in the belief that you already see what they have, what they can't see yet, and that you have faith in where they're going, it's really helping them to focus on the strengths they have rather than pointing out the weaknesses that are present.
Yeah, usually teens, they are very aware of their weaknesses. They
critique themselves all the time.
Yeah. So I think it is a helpful corrective measure to bring out the good in them as well.
Yeah. So my parents believed in me, right? They came to the States. They worked. My dad worked in a warehouse. My mom worked as a babysitter at home. This is a pretty typical arrangement for people who are immigrants to this country, right? Finding ways to support their family. And I think that I don't know if many people can attest to this, but my parents used to always say, right, we're going to work as hard as we can to put a roof over your head and food on the table. And maybe not good food all the time, but food on the table, right? And
that's very typical.
Yeah, and that's their mindset is, I don't have to offer you a whole lot more, but if I can offer you a roof and food on your table, then you can do the rest. You can conquer the world with just those two basic needs met. And yes, in modern psychology, we may say, well, but your children are, they need emotional support, they need good health, they need, tutoring, they need to learn music, and they need to, train their mind to be flexible. Yes, you can have all of those things, but my parents were wrong. You do need those two fundamental securities. And that sense of security lays the foundation, and that belief pushed me forward to knowing that I don't have to ever worry about a roof or food. All I have to do is worry about how I function, right? What I do and how to drive myself. And their belief helped me do that. That helped me drive myself in a way that pushed me forward to where I am today. And I'm grateful for that. So, maybe it is about all of these other things, but it should always be about the basic fundamental needs first, that sense of security.
And I just want to add that because the common critique, like you said, is, oh, they only provide the materialistic stuff, but they don't provide emotional connection. And I think it's a fair critique for traditional parenting, because traditionally we don't express our feelings much. And it can be something of a hindrance in traditional family. And we definitely need to work on that. But I do agree that it is such a privilege that when traditional parenting, they commit to you that this is what I'm going to do, and you can achieve the rest. And I think it can be an empowering message.
So the other thing that I think my parents did, were that was really helpful to me, was to make sure that there are positive relationships within the family, right? And that it isn't always me relying on them, but that it's about the family and the siblings relying on each other.
Taking care of one another.
Yeah, and
a system like that.
That's such a powerful system, right? Because if you have your children only rely on you, well, I mean, there's no guarantee that you're going to be here until whenever, right? And there's no guarantee that you can be their guidance forever. And there's not even a guarantee that you can have this relationship with them for however long you imagine that you would be able to, because things happen. And so in helping your children create this complex network of people they can rely on and rely on them gives them not only accountability, but comfort in knowing that if something happened, I have other people to lean on. I have other security. I have other needs. Right. And so in my family, like I said, my parents were all about, I'm going to provide you a roof and food on the table. My siblings were the ones who took care of me otherwise. Right. So they're the ones who bought me clothes. They're the ones who made sure I got haircuts. They're the ones who made sure, that I got braces when I needed. Right. And so my siblings paid for these things. They raised me in these ways. They supported me through all of these things. And so I looked at them as role models too. And that helped me make the connection with them that I would otherwise not. I mean, my oldest siblings raised me in these social ways, right? And then as a grown-up, my third brother and his wife also kept supporting me through, school, and then even after graduation. You know how hard it is to get, to get your life going, right? And to pursue a career. And I think that
especially as a broke grad student.
Yeah, and even as a fellow, you're pretty broke, right? So all of these things come to a point where I'm not relying on my parents as a sole system, but I'm relying on my family system as my support system. And I think because of that reliance, I've developed really close relationships with them and appreciation for them that I would otherwise not have.
It's pretty common for traditional family, for the oldest or the older would take on the role of taking care of
the younger.
Usually because the parents are too busy just putting food on the table and roof over your head. And one pitfall would be parentification, that switching of roles. And I have seen cases like that of people, their role got switched very young, very early on, and it just prolonged for decades like that. But I do believe
too early.
Yeah, it's too early, and it's not age appropriate. But I think when we give age appropriate responsibilities for siblings to care for one another, I think it is a very good thing.
I think the another thing that my parents did that I really liked and that I aspire to even as a parent in the current age is they made sure to put me in environments where I can thrive. And I think that for parents who are simply thinking about meeting basic needs, it's hard to think about because sometimes you don't have the option to be able to do that. But where you can, definitely try, because I think that the environment, not just the home environment, so we've been talking about the home environment and making sure that there are relationships and connections and unity there, but then outside of the home environment, once your child turns 4 or 5, they're in school for most of the day. And so that environment is a big piece. And I think traditional parents, and I know that a lot of modern parents do this too, is to find the best districts, school districts to put their children in, and to find the best things to offer to their children. And within whatever limitation you have, you can always think about providing that and looking for that and be engaged in that process. And I think my parents made sure to do that. So as much as they can, they invested in providing the environment where there would be people to provide the support. And I'm thankful not only for my parents for putting me in those situations, but for people who took on the responsibility, right? For teachers who took on the responsibility to take care of me, right? And so, I remember I used to have in maybe 6th grade, so in elementary school, I used to have these teachers who, knowing that I'm a child of first generation immigrant parents, they would offer me these things, right? They would buy me things that they know I wouldn't otherwise have. I even have one teacher. I don't know. I can't say that this is ethical or not, but I remember it, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life, right? It's the support of somebody who goes above and beyond what they can provide for you or what their role is in your life. And so I had this teacher in 6th grade who, on the weekends would occasionally take me to like McDonald's, right? And we'll have breakfast together. And it's just like such fond memories that I have of people who didn't just stick with their role in my life, but went above and beyond what they had to do to provide me with those kinds of experiences that they know I wouldn't otherwise have. And I think that for me, that gives me the sense of wanting to give back and contribute and be that same source of support for other people, right?
I really appreciate the emphasis on education from my parents, and I believe a lot of other parents, traditional parents, do this too, because they always remind me that education could change your life. That's the only way out from whatever situation you are in. And I'm just glad that they ingrained that into my mind. That's something I definitely will teach my kids as well, to value knowledge, value learning, value the just amazing knowledge of this world that we has accumulated for thousands of years.
And to keep being teachable, right? To keep learning, to have this teachable spirit. And I think that just by having, people in your life who's willing to constantly remind you of those things. So, we always have this joke running in my family of where like my brothers would say, the only thing Dad would do about our education is to say, put words in yourself, because no one can take that from you. And no matter how much money you make, like your wealth can always be stolen, right? But your words can't be, or your education can't be, or your knowledge can't be. And I think that it's really funny because it's a running joke in our family to say, that's Dad's contribution to our education. And yet I have to attest that reminder alone on almost a daily level pushed us all to really pursue that. And maybe at the beginning to please our parents, but at the end, we all recognize that, they're not wrong.
Sometimes parents can be very afraid of their children failing. And I think one of the things that helps me so much is for me to learn to fail, to learn that it is okay to not be okay. And I think that's something so important, because life is rough. Life is, you can say life is suffering. You suffer one way or the other, in relationship, in school, in work, and you have to be ready to take the blows that life is going to give you.
Sometimes parents see their children's failure as a reflection of who they are, and I find myself, caught in that once in a while, and I have to keep constantly reminding myself that I have to allow my children to be who they are, and that my job as a gardener is not to change my sunflower into a tulip, just because I like tulips better, right? But to actually provide the best nurturing environment so that my sunflower can thrive the way it's intended to. And I think that sometimes as parents, we get that pressure because we feel like if our children didn't have a certain skill or didn't reflect, to the world a certain thing, that is a reflection of us and who we are and how we should be seen. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself for a human who makes their own mind, who does their own thing, and who you have very little control over, right? So take the pressure off yourself and keep encouraging your children that they haven't succeeded yet, not that they've failed. I can tell you, if my parents thought that the first time I failed that I wouldn't get to where I am, I would have given up if they didn't, kept saying, look, it's one try, right? And so I think as a rule in life, it's just your pain teaches you things that are important. And to recognize that those moments of suffering and pain could really, and even when you're living an impoverished life, is an opportunity to grow and to thrive and to see things in a different light. It could really change your perspective and mold who you are. You have to make that determination to help your children see that.